اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected Sayyid Muntadher, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So as you can see up here, me and Sayyid are going to try and change it up a little bit from our traditional lecture. We're going to do kind of a live podcast style of presentation today. So inshallah, Sayyid is going to share some wisdom with us, and we're very lucky to have him here today to commemorate the birth anniversary of our third Imam, Imam al-Hussain, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi.
Allahumma salli ala
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Sayyid, today's conversation is going to kind of explore a little bit about the life of Imam Hussain, a little bit about some of his maxims, some of his short sayings. It might feel a little bit random at times where we're going with the topics, but inshallah we'll relate it all back to our third Imam who we're celebrating today.
Ahsant. I want to first begin by wishing all of you, wishing you, Brother Kumail, our respected Hajj Hussain elders, brothers and sisters, a Kushali Mubarak. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this birth anniversary a blessed and an auspicious one, and to make it a cause, inshaAllah, for the showering of all sorts of blessings upon all mu'mineen and mu'minat, and to make it, inshaAllah, an honorable event by which we will, inshaAllah, receive the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, receive the fulfillment of our hajat, shifa of our marda, inshaAllah, as well as the relief of all of our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and the rest of the places in the world that are under oppression.
Inshallah. So Sayyid, a lot of our discourse around Imam Hussain, a lot of our discussion around Imam Hussain is centered around his tragedy, the way he sacrificed his life in Karbala, the way he lost so many of his companions. But today I kind of want to refocus that conversation away from what we know about Imam Hussain to some things that perhaps we may not know, some of his narrations, some of his maxims that he's informed us about. So by way of quick introduction, perhaps we can just go over the basics of Imam Hussain and who he was, and then we can proceed with some information there.
Inshallah. So, the basics that we all are aware of course, is that he was the son of Ali and Fatima, without a doubt. He's the second grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He was born after 6 months of pregnancy, and this was unique to our beloved Imam alayhi salam, and he was born on the 3rd of Sha'ban, year 4 after Hijrah, after the migration of the Holy Prophet to Medina. May the peace and blessings be upon him and upon his progeny. And as well as that he was the third Imam of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. These are basic information that we all know. The fact that he lived during the time of his grandfather, and his grandfather left this world when our beloved Imam was about 6 or 7 years old. After that, he witnessed the tragedy of his mother, Fatima salamullahi alayha, and of course, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And thereafter, he witnessed the wars of Amir al-Mu'min alayhi salam. He witnessed the rest of the tragedies that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam had to go through, leading all the way to Karbala and his great sacrifices that we are all aware of. This is just a basic intro that I feel is important to remind us of as we begin this discussion, inshallah.
Ahsant. So there's kind of a couple characteristics of Imam Hussain that I think are very salient or very pertinent to his character, one of them being the fact that he was so close to Rasulullah. So, he comes from the most holy progeny. His father, Imam Ali, his mother, Lady Fatima, and his grandfather, the greatest of creation, Rasulullah.
Sallallahu alayhi wa ahsant.
So what about some of his wives, for example, or some of his children, for example? Can you give us a little bit of background on?
Ahsan, very good question. So basically, in terms of his wives and children, when we read the books of Tariq, the historical books, and the books of Ahadith, we find variance. We find a lot of different, narrations with this respect. I will only share that which we have some consensus on, that which is reported in valuable and authentic books like that of Shaykh al-Mufid, Radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, as his book Al-Irshad. In this book he reports, for example, that our beloved Imam had 6 children from 5 wives. Now, I'll name the wives and name the children, but that does not mean that there is no other children for the Imam or perhaps other wives. And that's why I made this disclaimer that I'll only rely on a Shaykh al-Mufid's testimony, and Shaykh al-Mufid being the prominent scholar of the beginning of the Ghayba al-Kubra, the greater occultation. He was the teacher of a Sayyid al-Murtada and a Sharif al-Radi, and he came after the time of Shaykh al-Kulayni and a Shaykh al-Saduq. So very, very prominent scholar who holds a lot of weight in terms of his knowledge and reliability among the Shia Twelvers.
And
So
quickly, Sayyid, can I just interject and
Sure.
ask the book you mentioned, Kitab al-Irshad, can you talk a little bit about the contents of that book?
Yes, Al-Irshad fi Ma'rifati Hujaji Allahi ala al-Ibad basically is a book that he compiled to be a book of biography, where he mentions the biography of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the biography of our beloved first Imam, second Imam al-Hasan, Hussain, all the way to the 12th Imam, Ajjalallahu Farajahu al-Sharif. And this is one of the major sources of Shia historical books. If we want to say, do we Shia have a biography or a historical book? One of them being Al-Irshad fi Ma'rifati Hujajillahi ala al-Ibad. And this is basically translated as the guidance, Irshad, in knowing the proofs of Allah upon the Ibad, His servants. And it's a very, very rich book. I believe it was translated to English. You may search it, probably find it on al-islam.org perhaps. But this is one of the valuable books, and ulama generally rely on that book. But again, it's not the only book. That is why ulama sometimes have to visit other books to figure out, for example, some of the discrepancies, right? Sometimes you may hear in certain riwayat that Imam had, for example, 10 children and not 6, and more than 5 wives. And this is where muhaqqiqeen and those who are well versed in history and in ahadith, they dissect these ahadith, they practice their ijtihad, and they arrive at different conclusions. In the book of Irshad, he mentions 5, and I'll name them inshallah, and name their children as well. So the first that he mentions is Shahr Banaway or Shah Zinan. Shahr Bano or Shahr Banaway or Shah Zinan, there's also this, her name is controversial. And there's an opinion that says there were 2 ladies, one Shahr Bano and one Shah Zinan. Shah Zinan translates from Persian to the Queen of Women. And this woman was the child or the daughter of Yazdajard III, a king of Persia, when they came as captives to the Islamic State in Medina. The Imam, the commander of the faithful, had suggested to Umar during that time, who was the caliph, to allow these women who come from noble families to choose who they want to marry, as opposed to you giving them to whomever. And one of them chose our beloved Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And that was the woman who was known as Shah Zinan or Shahr Banaway, and she bore our beloved 4th Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. And that was the only child she bore, and the history says that she actually died after giving birth, according to one of the narrations. The second of his wife was Ishaq bint Talha at-Taymi. Now, Ishaq initially was the wife of our beloved second Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. And before al-Hasan al-Mujtaba passed away, he'd made a will to his brother al-Hussein. He says, my brother, This is a noble woman. This is a respected woman. I want you to take care of her after me, and I want you to marry her so to ensure that she will be under your care with my child Fatima. She had a Fatima alaykum as-salam, daughter of Imam al-Hassan, and this Fatima later married her cousin Zain al-Abidin, and they both have our fifth Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. After our beloved Imam married her, she also bore a child for him, and that was another Fatima. Is this the Fatima that stayed in Medina who was sick? Perhaps. Is it another Fatima that joined Imam Hussain in Karbala? Perhaps. But there's this Fatima that belongs to our beloved Imam Hussain, and her older sister Fatima, the daughter of Al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. So this is the second wife. The third one was Al-Rabab bint Imr al-Qais, from a noble family as well. Her father was well known. Imr al-Qais was known for his poetry, known for his tribal and fame and so on and so forth. He was a wealthy man in the city of Mecca pre-Islamic era. And from Al-Rabab, our Imam had Sukayna or Sakina, the older Sukayna, not Bibi Sakina Ruqayya that we call here Sakina. It's Sukayna or Sakina, the older one. And he had also Ali al-Asghar, also known as Abdullah the infant. Both of these children were from this woman, this noble woman, Al-Rabab. Some people call her al-Rabab, but that's incorrect. She is actually Al-Rabab, that is her name. The fourth is Layla. Layla bint Abi Murrah ibn Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. From the mother's side, she's from Banu Umayyah. From the father's side, she's from Bani Thaqif. This woman was also a noble woman, and she bore Ali al-Akbar for our beloved Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid argues that Ali al-Akbar is not the Akbar, Ali the eldest. He says Ali al-Akbar is Imam Zain al-Abidin. He is the Akbar. He is the oldest of Imam Hussein's children. This Ali is the middle Ali, the one that was martyred in Karbala. And he has his argument for that. But again, this goes back to this controversial issue of history. Which one is Ali? Because there's a narration attributed to our fourth Imam when Ibn Ziyad says to him, "What's your name?" He says, "Ali." He says, "Didn't Allah kill Ali?" Referring to the martyr in Karbala. He says, "Kana li akhun qatalahu nas." And some riwayat say, he says, "Kana li akhun akbar." I had another brother who was older than me who people killed, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was responding to Ibn Ziyad alayhi la'na wa su'al adab. So far we have how many wives? 4, do we agree? Okay, very good. Now when we say 5 wives, that doesn't mean they were all at once, because the first one died and our beloved Imam married the rest. The fifth one was Al-Quda'iyya. We don't know her first name, but she's known as Al-Quda'iyya. Perhaps that's her tribe. And Al-Quda'iyya only had one child, and that is Ja'far ibn al-Hussein. And Ja'far died during the time of his father. He was not in Karbala. He died a normal death during the time of his father, Al-Hussein alayhi salam. So we have here 6 children and 5 wives. Now you may ask a question, and I asked the same question, where is Bibi Ruqayya in this? Because we don't find her in any of these mothers. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid has not established a riwayah, or does not have the certainty that Imam Hussain had a daughter by that name. But other ulama do have that. That's why we said we don't always rely just on one book. There are other ulama that have established that Al-Hussain alayhi salam had a daughter by the name Ruqayya, the one who is buried in Sham in one of the ruins, as we all know. So this is just a brief of the wives and children of our beloved Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. So Sayyid, we'll go kind of a radical change of topic here.
Sure.
We'll go with one of the sayings of the Imam that's perhaps very well known by all of us, is the reward for greeting somebody else. For example, your brother in Islam. And if you noticed, I don't know if you did, but I was quick to say salam.
You wanted to take the 69,
so I wanted to take the,
and I only get one.
Of the reward. So can you kind of explain what is the saying from Imam al-Hussein, and why is the reward so skewed towards me?
Ahsant, very good question. So we have a hadith or a maxim, a beautiful maxim attributed to the Imam in Tuhaf al-Uqul. There's a book called Tuhaf al-Uqul, a book of maxims from Ibn Shu'bah al-Harrani from the 4th Hijri century. And in Tuhaf al-Uqul, he reports that our beloved Imam says, one who initiates a greeting receives 69 deeds, and the one who responds receives 1. And the question is, why is this not equal? Why is it not 35 and 35? You know, this is one of the things where's equality? Well, equality is not always justice. Sometimes equality is unjust. And who knows that? Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of justice and the Lord of equality. One of the reasons being is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here wants to give encouragement for initiating goodness. You know, you have two people who have a problem, who have beef with one another. You have a husband and wife who have a disagreement. Always the one that initiates the reconciliation receives the higher reward. So by way of encouraging, initiating righteous deeds such as salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises this very high reward for the one who initiates. Number 2, initiating salam is not wajib, it's mustahab. But you still go out of your way and you initiate it. And therefore you get most of the reward. Responding to a salam is not mustahab, it's wajib. You have no option but to respond, so you only get that one good deed. And from this really we learn a lesson, that it is very important to not wait for others to initiate goodness, be it towards us or towards others. Let's always be sabbaqeen, as we read in some of the verses. Sabiqu, sari'u, right? To always compete in terms of righteousness. Oftentimes people compete in worldly matters. And to an extent that's okay, to an extent, if it's lawful and there's nothing wrong with it. But overall it's dispraised. The real competition should be in righteousness. Who does more righteous deeds? Who does it first? That's how we should be competing. And there, when it comes to salam, I don't wait for others to come and say salam to me. If I am capable and able to do so, I should initiate and say assalamu alaikum. That's why Brother Kumail here raced and right away said assalamu alaikum so that he gets the 69, and poor me, I receive 1 for responding.
Are there other examples that you can think of where we're encouraged to go towards the good deed? For example, perhaps maintaining relations with your relatives.
Ahsant. Oftentimes, why don't you call your relative? Well, he never calls me. You know, if we play this circle, if he doesn't call me, I won't call him. And I go to him and he says, if he doesn't call me, I won't call him. No one's going to call anyone, right? This is what we call the vicious circle in mantiq, in logic, ad-dawr, right? I won't call you until you call me. And you tell me, well, I won't call you until you call me. Well, we won't call each other. So initiating is highly, highly encouraged in Islam. In fact, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi in one of the occasions, people tell him that you say you should reconcile with your brother. You and your brother have a dispute, reconcile. He says, but Rasulullah, sometimes you have a zalim and a madloom. I'm not going to initiate and reconcile with him because he did dhulm to me. He says, no. Ma balil madloom yadhhab ila zalim wa ya'tadhir. He says, no. Let the madloom go to the zalim and say, I apologize, even though he's not the zalim, just for the sake of bringing that brotherhood back. And again, we're not talking about serious dhulm here. We're talking about minor things that we sometimes tend to hold grudges against one another for that are not even worth it. Let it go, who cares? Well, he said it first, he started the problem. Okay, he started the problem, but now I'm going to end the problem. And it takes a little bit of sacrifice. Does it take away from your dignity? Not at all. Not at all. Your dignity is preserved because Allah has promised to preserve the dignity of believers, provided they act according to His recommendations and not their ego and their satanic whispers.
Sayyid, a little bit of marriage advice here. Would you recommend that in a relationship as well? Always be the first one to apologize?
Of course, always be the first to apologize. And I'm telling you, been there, done that, right? And especially if you're a man, if you're really a man, you should initiate the apology. And it does not take away from your manhood, trust me. I'm not saying this to please our dear and respected sisters and mothers and aunties, but what I'm saying is that sometimes a woman, due to her emotional state, is not ready to easily come and apologize. You take it, you go and apologize. It's not going to hurt. In the end, you'll be both happy. You'll forget about it. So it doesn't matter. But you'll get the reward of initiating. And on the other hand, sisters find that the husband is hard-headed, try to go and also initiate. Maybe he could be at fault, but there's no harm in you initiating and trying to reconcile. Because in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to see people reconcile and to forgive one another, especially in a family unit. Sometimes we have cultural norms where I am the older brother and he's the younger brother. I'm not going to go. He has to come to me. It's not always like that. Sometimes the father, even though he has so much status and right over his son, the father sometimes says, you know what, my son's very hard-headed. I'm going to go and apologize to him. Why? Because they want that bond to continue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, again, and I want to emphasize, loves to see mu'mineen and mu'minat in the best of relationship among one another. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً. They're brothers and sisters in Islam.
On the topic of things that Imam Hussain has said, and pulling it all the way up until today, this concept of imamat, has Imam Hussain given us any guidance or spoken at all about his grandson, our present Imam, the awaited Sayyid?
Yes, in fact, there are several hadith by our beloved third Imam, Al-Hussain alayhi salam, where he highlights the importance of holding on the rope of Ahlul Bayt and being steadfast, especially during the time of the occultation, al-ghayba. And I'd like to read this riwayah, and I'd like to read all of it. It's a bit long, but I think it's important. He says, and this is by Uyun al-Akhbar, Uyun Akhbar al-Rida by Shaykh al-Saduq, also one of our important books of hadith, by one of our great shaykhs, Shaykh al-Saduq, Radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, who was before Shaykh al-Mufid, chronologically speaking. He says that our Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam said there are 12 Mahdis from us, from among us. The first of whom is the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And the last is the ninth of my descendants. And he is the one who will rise with the truth. Through him, Allah Almighty will revive the earth after its death. And through him, the religion of the truth will prevail over all religions. He will have an occultation. Some people will apostatize. They will either leave the faith or deny the existence of the Imam or leave tashayyu', the fold of tashayyu'. And by the way, when a person says, I don't believe in Al-Imam Al-Mahdi, as a darura, as a creed that is Islamic, they leave the fold of Islam, not just the fold of Iman. Because believing in Al-Mahdi is a Muslim belief, not a Shia belief. All Muslims, including the Wahhabis and the most extremists, say Al-Mahdi is a must. But they say he'll come at the end of time, a Sayyid from the children of Fatima and Ali. He will rise in Mecca and he'll say, I am Al-Mahdi, and we have to follow him. They don't say that he was born to Al-Hasan al-Askari. That's where we differ. But someone who's a Shia 12er who says, I don't believe that Al-Mahdi is born and he'll come towards the end of time, that kind of person would also leave the fold of tashayyu', leaving the fold of the school of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So this is the Imam alayhi salam referring to the fact of some of these people were apostatized. I mean, they leave that either the fold of tashayyu' or the fold of Islam, and others will remain steadfast on the religion. And they will be harmed for that. Either, physical harm, financial harm, emotional harm. We may go through a lot of distress because of our belief and because of the school of thought that we belong to. He says, and when the promise comes, meaning when the Imam arrives, those who were patient in the era of the occultation in the face of harm, their status will be like that of one who fought with the sword on the side of the Messenger of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Ahsant.
So in addition to proofs in the Quran, we also have hadiths from our Ahlul Bayt that tell us
Many, numerous, hundreds of ahadith that talk about the Mahdi and the ghaiba of al-Mahdi. We have ahadith 1400 or 1300 years old that say there will be such a phenomena that will take place. It's not something that we just made up. The ahadith from Rasulullah, from Imam Ali, from Al-Hasan, from Hussain, very early on, prophesied that this will happen. The ninth descendant of the third Imam will have a very long occultation. So it's not like a surprise for the Shias when it happened. They were already prepared for such a happening and such a occurrence.
and off the top of your head, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here.
No problem.
But do you know of any narrations of the reward for somebody who remains steadfast while waiting for the Imam who they cannot see?
Ahsant. Now, in addition to this riwayah that said they will get the reward of one who has fought with Rasulullah, we have riwayat that say they get the reward of a shaheed soaked in their blood in one of the wars of Rasulullah. Imagine how important that is and how high of a status. To be a martyr in Badr with Rasulullah, to be a martyr in Hunayn, to be a martyr in Al-Khandaq, receiving that kind of reward, not for fighting, just for waiting and persevering and holding on to the belief of our 12th Imam Ajjallah Farajahu Sharif.
Last question from me, and this is kind of an interesting one. Again, a little bit of a radical change of topic. But interestingly, there have been reports that Imam Hussain could understand the language of animals, and in some cases that he would actually translate that language to his companions.
Ahsant. We have numerous ahadith, and before the ahadith, let me go to the Quran in case somebody's thinking in their mind, oh my God, these Shia are making up stories and it's all ghulu. Sulaiman, ala nabina wa alayhi wa ala Sulaiman, at-tahiyya wa salam, in chapter 27, verse 16 says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, speaking about Sulaiman, وَوَرِثَ سُلَيْمَانُ دَاوُودَ. Sulaiman inherited Dawood. وَقَالْ Sulaiman قال, he said, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ, O people, عُلِّمْنَا مَنطِقَ الطَّيْرِ. We have been taught the language of birds. Allah taught us to speak the language of birds. Now, what does it take to know the language of birds, the language of the atoms, the language of the sea, whatever it takes? What does it, what is the tool to know these languages and to have that knowledge? It is what we know in the ahadith as ilmun min al-kitab, a special knowledge from the very special book. Asif, the wasi of Sulaiman, when he brought the throne of Balqis from Yemen all the way to Sham in less than of a blink of an eye, he brought it by what kind of power? علم من الكتاب. قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. In our hadith say علم من الكتاب, that is knowledge from that special book of codes. But then we have someone who has علم الكتاب, the entire book, and that is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And by extension, the hadith say Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and by extension the Ahlul Bayt. So someone who has ilm al-kitab has much more letters, huruf, to decode certain things in the universe than that of Sulaiman and the wasi of Sulaiman. So there's nothing strange about accepting these ahadith that say that the Ahlul Bayt knew the languages of animals. Yes, someone could argue, do we have enough proof that they knew? But here we're not arguing to prove whether they knew or not. We're saying it is not a form of ghulu, exaggeration, to believe or to consider it as truth that they did have the knowledge of the languages of birds. If a person is able to learn the languages of other human beings, the languages that they have no idea about, why can't they learn languages of other species? If they know how or if they have the tools. And Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have the tools. They have the divine tools that give them that knowledge. Now the second thing is, do birds and do animals even speak, is the question. Do they say things for our imams to hear them and translate what they're saying? And this is something I will also refer to the Quran in, because there's no dispute that everything in the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in chapter 24, verse 41. He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alam tara anna Allah yusabbihu lahu man fis samawati wal ardi wat tayru saffatin kullun qad alima salatahu wa tasbihah wallahu alimun bima yaf'alun. Have you not regarded that Allah is glorified by everyone in the heavens and the earth and the birds spreading their wings? Each knows his prayer and glorification, and Allah knows best what they do. Here we find in Kitabul Khara'ij wa Jara'ih by a great mufassir by the name of Qutb al-Din al-Rawandi, a scholar from the Shia 12ers who died in the 6th Hijri century. He reports a few lines, and I will report only some of them, attributed to Imam Hussain, where he translates some of the cries of certain animals. He says, for example, when you hear the rooster cry as in they make a sound, they make a call, they're saying, he who knows God will not forget to mention him. He who knows God will not forget to mention him. That's what the rooster says when they are, for example, calling or making a specific call. And then he says, when the kite, type of bird, cries, it says, trust in Allah and you'll be provided your livelihood. And he says that when the serpent, a very large snake, praises Allah, she says, what does the snake say? How miserable is one who disobeys you, O most merciful. And when the parrot cries, he says, whoever remembers his Lord, his sin will be forgiven. And when the nightingale cries, it says, truly there is no God but Allah. Now this is just a few lines attributed to our beloved Imam, where he translates some of what these animals are saying when they are making cries that we don't understand. And then Imam quotes a verse to substantiate what he's saying. And the verse is from Surah 17, chapter 17, verse number 44. He says, وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُمْ. There is nothing but it celebrates. In other words, everything celebrates his praise, but you do not understand their glorification. We don't have the means as humans who don't have that very special knowledge to translate that very tasbih. When you hear the bird making sound, they're not just making sound for the sake of sound. Even when dogs are barking, sometimes there is a translation to that barking. It's not just merely barking. And the rest of the animals. You find over 20 or 30 animals mentioned in this very long hadith that I just quoted from, that our Imam translates these cries of these animals. Assalamu alaikum.
And the last thing before we kind of wrap up here, can you leave us with one final thought about Imam al-Hussain? Something, a characteristic, an attribute, something that about him that really inspires you that perhaps we can reflect on tonight?
One thing that I want to say, and this is a reminder for myself and for all of my respected brothers and sisters, is to always remember the religion that you have today is very precious. If you believe that the blood of Hussain and his children and companions was precious, and that he gave all of that in order to save that religion, then you need to really understand that that religion is precious. And what this means is when somebody gives their own life and that of their children to preserve something for you, don't take that thing for granted. Don't waste it. Don't abandon it. Hold on to it with your teeth, with your hands, with all of your limbs, and most importantly with your heart. And don't let it go easy. Oh, I'm not going to practice this hukum. I'll delay my salah. While Imam Hussain alayhi salam in the battlefield insisted on praying. And many, many other examples. So Imam Hussain gave everything so generously to preserve the deen for us. What should we do to also continue to preserve that deen? Should we be a miser about what we give? Or should we be also generous by giving from our time, from our energy, from our wealth, from whatever we have to keep that religion preserved? And everyone does it in their own way. From here I want to mention and appreciate our respected volunteers in this community and other communities. These volunteers have given their times, be it in management, be it in cooking and serving and whatever they're doing, in order to do what? In order to make these occasions happen. And these occasions are an example of what? Preserving the religion. What has preserved Islam for us as 12ers until today? The governments? No. It's these majalis. So these majalis are very precious and valuable. And if it wasn't for the sacrifices of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we would not hold these majalis. Therefore, when we remember Hussain, we should remember his sacrifices and appreciate them. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Sayyid. That was quite a bit of information and a lot of kind of interesting stuff that I had never understood before, especially the last question. I think that was kind of a fun one to go over. So, as always, I mean, we appreciate your knowledge, we appreciate your time.
My pleasure, thank you.
And we send the blessings of a loud salawat on Imam al-Hussain, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.